بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد ومن والاه. I know that this book is hard. I know. I know it's dense, man. So we're going to start just taking sections of the book now after kind of giving you some real much needed foundational work that was meant to make you a little uncomfortable and make you say like, man, I don't think I ever studied theology before. It's kind of what wanted to happen there, you know? And now we're going to start to move into some things that you are going to become familiar with. I want you guys to do me a favor. As we're going through this, if you recognize something that you learned before, flag it. Tell me, hey, I remember this. Because it might help you realize the role of this book in all the texts that we studied so far. So you kind of want to think about when we studied theology, we started like on a little boat, you know? Then we got some snorkeling equipment and we started like looking in. And then we went under. Now you're at the bottom. Like you're almost at the bottom. Like you're down. So you're looking back like this. Okay. Keep that sort of in front of you as we read. And then if you think you see something like, oh man, I know that, let me know. So we're at lesson 7, where we're going to talk about the origination of the world and knowledge of our creator. Of course, in the actual text, he does a lot of outdated science. But what's dope is like he was doing science, man. Like it's very much part of his discussion. The modern Muslim imagination, as it's been fed by sources outside of like normative Islamic thought, has weaponized science in ways that the evangelical church has. We want to we don't want people to dictate how we act or how we don't act. Both is co-opting, right? So how we act or how we don't act should not be the purview of anyone else. Like we have our own agency, we have our own language, we have our own sciences, we have our own terminologies, we have our own hearts and minds, you know? So just keep that in mind. How to read this lesson. This lesson is designed to help you build theological vocabulary, which you may already know. I ain't saying nothing. You will see Arabic text marked with special brackets like this. These are direct quotes from the book Al-Irshad. For each quote, you're going to find an italicized English translation, a plain explanation of what the ideas mean, a concrete example from everyday life to help you visualize the concept. As you can see, I'm trying to work on how to make this book teachable. I don't think it's ever been taught in English before, man. So yeah, it's a heavy responsibility, to pull this off. May Allah give us tawfiq. What are our lesson objectives? Distinguish clearly between eternal divine knowledge and originated temporary human knowledge. We forget, right? Define the 2 building blocks of the created world, what are called substances and araḍ. Explain the concept of contingency, jawāz, why things don't have to exist. Demonstrate why a contingent world requires an eternal maker. Anyone ever heard this before in anything we've done? What's that term that we use to describe eternal maker, necessary, existent?
Wajibul wujud.
Yeah, so here you see it. Wajibul wujud. Categorize attributes into 3 attributes of the eternal maker: necessary, impossible, permissible. We did that before. Refute the idea of infinite chain of causes. We'll get to that maybe on Wednesday. In the previous lessons, we established thinking rationally and why it's necessary and how that rational thinking should be guided by the Sharia, how they go together. Imam al-Ghazali has an awesome metaphor. He says that rational and religion is like the oil and the flame. Without the oil, you ain't got the flame. Without the flame, you ain't got the oil. Now we turn our attention to what we are thinking about. To think about theology is to think about the world. That's very important for you as you think about applied theology. You see what ICE is doing, this domestic terrorist organization. Epstein, that the world is being led by a bunch of baby-eating, blood-drinking, pedophilia Satanists. Yeah, it's like, man, to be a theologian is to be thinking about the world, not to be living in a mosque. This lesson guides you from observing the universe to realizing logically that a creator must exist. We skipped quite a bit. It's a huge book, but a lot of it we've talked about in previous classes. The argument is precise. It starts by defining what knowledge is, which we did. Then it looks at the building blocks of reality. Finally, it shows that because the world changes, it must have had a beginning. And if it had a beginning, it must have an originator who is unlike anything in creation. After we talked last time about knowledge, we defined knowledge. We went through what it is. Now Imam al-Haramain says, Al-ilmu yanqasimu ila al-qadimi wal-hadith. That knowledge is divided into two, eternal and temporary. We already know what hadith means, temporary. فالعلم قديم صفة الباري تعالى القائم بذاته. That eternal knowledge is an attribute of the Creator only, who subsists on his own. قائم بنفس. Here you see some of the terminology that you used before formalization, right? Imam Haramain is hundreds of years before the books we studied. So what I'm showing you by teaching you this is that across centuries, you see a theological symmetry, right? Scholars taught this. Imam al-Haramain is the 4th century. Dardir was 200 years ago. Marzuki 150 years ago. So what we did is we went like late Ummah, 1 generation away from the Salaf. Imam al-Haramain is like 1 or 2 generations from the Salaf. See what we did, see why we did that, so you can see across history, there's going to be this symmetry that's happening, this academic pedagogic approach. So you can refute people that are like, oh, this is something new, or this is like a bid'ah, or man, this is being taught by Sunnis for decades, centuries, man. The majority of them, not all of them. And there were differences, of course. But let's not go to these extremes, man. العلم ينقسم إلى القديم والحادث فالعلم قديم صفة الباري تعالى القائم بذاته المتعلق بالمعلومات غير متناهية. He said that eternal knowledge is an attribute of the Creator who is self-subsisting, relating to infinite objects of knowledge, meaning his knowledge knows about infinite things because his knowledge is infinite, meaning everything that's created or not created, Allah knows about it. Allahu Akbar. That's a whole nother level. Because you and I, when we say creation, that's for you and me. Like when we say al-ghayb is for us, not for Allah. Nothing is ghayb to Allah. It's ghayb to us. The text begins by splitting knowledge into 2 types. Eternal, and this is what I need to remember. There's knowledge qadim, knowledge hadith. That's all. I don't need you necessarily to know all the philosophical stuff I talked about at the end. I just need you to remember, knowledge is infinite, knowledge is temporal. Khalas, 2 types. The infinite knowledge is only to Allah. The temporary knowledge is to everything but Allah that has a mind. Khalas. So eternal knowledge belongs only to God. It has no beginning, does not change, and covers everything, past, present, and future, all at once. It is not learned over time. It is, because He is. That's why you learned in our class, كونه عالما. Yani always knowing. And we don't say about Allah's knowledge that it is coming out of a need for fulfilling a void, meaning ignorance. No, Allah's knowledge is a consistent existing trait. The opposite of it is what we learned in class, sifat Al-ma'ani is what? Ignorance. Originated knowledge belongs to us and other creatures. It starts at a point in time. So now if we think about the argument against Christianity, right? Instead of just saying like Jesus is not God, you can get into a much more scalpel-esque diagnosis and say, were there things that Jesus didn't know in your Bible? They say yes. That's a problem. That's not God. Because that implies that his knowledge was temporal. He knew something, he didn't know it. He didn't know something, he knew it. That's all falls under huduth. Everybody with me? We have a macro huduth, we have a micro huduth. The macro is me, I didn't exist, now I exist, right? The micro is, what class was I supposed to teach today? Oh, yeah, I forgot, man. That's a micro hadith. The fact that he walked in a physical realm under physical laws is in itself a violation of divinity for us. Because walking is huduth. The mere action is measured. So like if I go from here to here, that is a micro beginning and a micro ending. You understand now? So the laser-like focus now can be even more direct. He's not God. No problem. Here's specifics of why he's not God. And when I've talked to some Christians like this, it kind of makes them think about Tawheed, even for Muslims, but them in particular, they're like, yeah, I never thought. Yeah, exactly. Breathing is hadith. Everything is hadith. At a micro, macro level, cells dying in my body and being regurgitated or regenerated is hadith. I am a hadith being by essence. Well, Allah is infinite. قائم بذات. لا يفتقر إلى أي شيء. So we say his ilm, qadim, means no beginning, no ending. So originated knowledge belongs to humans and other creatures. It starts at a time and it ends in a time. And it requires effort. It is limited and can be forgotten. Whereas Allah's knowledge is fundamentally different in kind, not just in amount. So some will say amount we agree on, like God's transcendent, but then also the kind of knowledge is where we differ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge has no temporality at all. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. مُحِيطٌ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. That should affect us in our piety. Exactly, Mariama. Good. Good, Mariama writes. There's sifat used again like sifat hukmiya back in class. Same is a reason for this. Good catch. Good catch. And hadith. Again, same word used, same word used, same word used, same word used, same word used. Zahir, idhar, sifa, hadith, huduth, إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ, used by the Prophet in the hadith. All this. And one day as you continue to study, even though the terms may be a little different, you'll see that everything you're studying is from Quran and Sunnah. The wording may change because people change. But we'll get to that one day. But it's good you're making these connections. You're seeing the symmetry. Who doesn't see the symmetry, their knowledge goes to the cemetery. It's like they're gonna feel like they're dead because they're gonna be lost. So originated knowledge belongs to humans and other creatures. It starts at what he means is knowledge al-hadith, yani. It starts at a point in time. It requires effort to acquire. It is limited and can be forgotten. God's knowledge is fundamentally different in kind, not just in amount. That's why as you're studying with us, Your tawakkul on Allah should be more than any teacher, any book, anything, because Allah is Alim. The ilm is from Allah. Think of watching a parade from a helicopter versus watching it from the street corner. From the corner, you see floats one by one. You have to wait to see what comes next. But from the helicopter, a metaphor for a higher view, you see everything all at once. So then think about the transcendence of God that's beyond direction, time, place, and height. It's a really nice metaphor. So if I'm watching the parade in front of me, I'm limited to what I know. If I'm in a helicopter, I can see everything. Then what do we say about something that's so transcendent it's beyond direction? Allahu Akbar. You understand the metaphor? وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. So he knows every moment of history in a single eternal sight. SubhanAllah. So that's a great metaphor to think through. And if you think about it with us, even the parade metaphor, it's not so much about where we are distance-wise as just limiting our weaknesses to what we can see. Like the higher we get, the more we can see. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond all of that. In one single sight, everything. So at a personal level, I should be aware of my sin. I should be aware of my evil. I should monitor myself. And also should be hopeful. Allah knows, Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban, whoever fasts the month of Ramadan in iman and hope, Allah will forgive them. So I have that yaqeen, that hope in Allah who sees everything. He sees me struggling. There's some questions you can think about for this section. If we say God's existence is necessary, does it follow logically that his knowledge is also necessary? Can human knowledge become necessary? What we mean by necessary is not ending. No beginning, no ending. Qadim. Or does it always remain possible and contingent, our knowledge? There's some takeaways from this section. There is a strict dividing line between creator and creation in attributes, like knowledge. Human knowledge is acquired and linear. Divine knowledge is eternal, immediate, and exhaustive to us. We cannot judge God's knowledge by the limits of our own mind. That's the other thing here. Like, how am I going to try to encapsulate that exhaustive, eternal, immediate knowledge? He says, اعلموا أرشدكم الله أن الموحدين توطأوا على عبارة في أعراضهم ابتغاء منهم الجمع المعاني الكثيرة في العبارات الوجيزة. He says, no, may Allah guide you that the monotheists, he means the people of Islam, agreed upon certain expressions for their purposes, seeking to gather many meanings into concise phrases. He was talking about the use of terminology. What he means is that they use certain technical terms not to confuse people. It's like we talked about, remember in Aqidah Ta'awun, we talked about some people get mad at the word qadim, and we went through like why it's used. So what he's saying is, listen, in our study of theology, there's certain terminology that we use. It's not meant to confuse you, but what it's meant to do for us is to pack complex ideas into single words so we can speak precisely. Because theology needs exact language, just like medicine, Dr. Sarah, or engineering. So like when people say like, why do you use sifat al-ma'ani? Why did you use sifat al-ma'nawiyya? Why do you say wajib al-wujud? Well, that's why. So we can get to precision in our discussions. Al-alim huwa kullu mawjud siwa Allah. Al-alam huwa kullu mawjud siwa Allah ta'ala. وصفة ذاته. So for example, like alam in theology means everything except Allah. So here's like an example of a term that has a little bit of a more precise meaning. The word huduth has a more precise meaning. So he says al-alam, not al-alim is the knower. Al-alam is the universe. is what huwa kullu mawjudin siwa Allah, is everything except Allah and his attributes. This is the working definition of the world. It includes everything created, galaxies, souls, atoms, time, and space. If it isn't God, it's alam. That's why he said, listen, we're going to use sometimes words in ways that you don't understand because we want to use it for precision. So if a theologian says al-alam, it means kullu ma siwa Allah, everything but God, existence. Then he says, ثم العالم جواهر وأغراض. The world consists of substances and accidents. We'll get in a little deeper now. In other words, the text divides all created reality into two buckets. Substances are things that exist on their own and take up space, like bodies and atoms. Accidents are qualities that cannot exist alone. They must ride on a substance, like color, motion, and temperature. Have you ever studied Islamic theology like this before? This is Islamic theology as it should be taught. And in fact, contemporary science may say, you know, we can even add things to this, right? Like this is 1,000 years ago. So very, very, it's highly likely that we could even divide this more. I was talking to Dr. Sarah earlier about what's crazy about Imam Haramain. He's a scientist. He's talking about the world. You can't be a theologian without thinking about the world and science. You can't be a theologian and not think about justice. You can't be a theologian and not curse these satanic leaders of the world, baby blood drinking shayateen. Like that doesn't work. That's a limited vision. Do we expect all people to take that on? Of course not. Everybody has their own passion and field on what they do. But I'm sure, I think, Deli, when we talked in your interview, you expressed how sometimes like there's just lack of concern about social justice issues as it plays out with the Black Americans in America. How are you a theologian in America who benefits from the family of Malcolm and you don't think about this stuff? And whiteness does something that's very dangerous as a construction. Whiteness has a lot of gravity. It's almost like Neptune, like it would crush you if you get too close to it. And so what happens sometimes with immigrant communities, and I say this respectfully, is they get caught in the gravity of whiteness and they begin to essentialize their concerns inadvertently around whiteness without even knowing it. Hence, in every Muslim country, there's fair and lovely. But ain't no brown and beautiful. Because that gravity of white supremacy it will pull, and it pulls whites in too. Woke whites get caught up all the time. White people always got to check ourselves because it's exhausting and unrelenting and pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. Like last night, you know how we should look at the separate Super Bowl halftime performance? That's Jim Crow. That was a Jim Crow performance. Bunch of white people can't be around. What's the guy's name? Bunny. I don't know the dude's name, Puerto Rican guy. Right? They have their own separate performance. Doesn't that not remind us of something in this country about separation based on culture, race, and absolutely. Theology helps us think that way, man. So the gravity of post-colonial white supremacist ideology is like a white hole sucks people in. Not whites, whiteness. Some of the greatest carriers of whiteness as a ugly construction are some Black folks. That's just reality. Thomas Sowell, Clarence Thomas. So we want to think about, if we look at the fatwa that was given about giving money to lobbyists, it's essentialized around nothing about indigenous populations in America. Nothing there. As though it's impossible for certain people to imagine that in white America, there's poverty. That's what I'm saying. You're in the land of milk and honey, dude. Whereas those of us who work on the front lines of the community, we see the large number of immigrants in this country, and even those Muslims from America, second, first, third generation, in abject poverty, especially if you can't go to work because of ICE. That's not even in the fatwa. It essentializes concerns based on this gravity that's pulling people. And it can imagine that in America, there's poverty. That's how I read the fatwa from a philosophical point of view. I'm not going to publicly say that because it's harsh. And I could be wrong. But I don't see anything in there about keeping people's lights on in the Bronx. Or the guy who has 2 jobs with Uber and Lyft and send his kids to NYU. And now he can't do that because the tax they put on an Uber in New York City and groceries in New York City are through the roof. And anyone here know what it's like to apply for zakat in America? You know how much paperwork you have to fill out? It's a shame. It's not easy to get zakat from our institutions, but you're just going to shove zakat to a lobbyist. Don't get me started, man. Y'all gonna make me mad. I'm about to talk myself into some anger. But like, that's crazy. I know at Adams Center here in the DMV, Salha, to get zakah, it's like you filling out the IRS paperwork, man. And Imam Zaid said something to me that when he was in the Bay Area, they would actually send brothers and sisters in the neighborhood to Muslims and ask them, do you need zakah? SubhanAllah. He told me we gave out $200,000 locally to people who were eligible for zakat in the Bay Area. Because we know that the early Muslims would actually send people to look for people with zakah. I have digressed and I apologize. Please forgive me. This has been in my heart for since September when I first read the fatwa. So, Al-alam jawahirun wa a'radun. The world is made up of jawahir and araḍ. So think about like a red apple. The apple is a substance. It occurs in space and exists on its own. The redness and the roundness are accidents. You can find a green apple, you can find a yellow apple, find a white apple. You can't have a bucket of red without you can't have a bucket of red without a thing to be red. If you peel the apple, the redness changes, but what maintains itself? This is how we should deal with race. Where's our discussions on race? Your humanity is your substance. My color is an accident. If you took my color away I'm the vital organs. But where is Islamic theology on these issues? Silent. And also, we don't want to peel away things to the extent that we don't address injustices. We need to be careful here. We want to center ourselves on our humanity, our collective Banu Adamness, but we need to address also injustices, man. So here's some practice questions. State the rule in plain language. For every accident, there must be a substance that carries it. Why must this be true? Y'all getting, I'm putting it on y'all today. I'm sorry. But it's a great thing. Is the existence of the world necessary or possible? Can you imagine a universe where we don't exist? Ya Allah, just think about that. Is it possible to imagine a universe without us? Yes or no? Without the earth, without all these people, is it possible for the universe to exist without us? أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها? Allah says, are you more difficult to create than the universe? See how learning Tawheed like this is dope, man. It's amazing. But like it hits you like, wow, subhanAllah. It hits the heart, doesn't just hit the mind. We're not essential. So while we are substances, we are not essential substances to the overall existence of things. Technical terms are tools for precision, not just jargon. The world, everything other than God. Reality is made of things, substances, and qualities. You need to remember this. It's very important. Accidents define the state of substances moving, still, hot, cold, what we're going to call later on lawazim. هذا تلازمني أو هذه تلازمني. Next time, we're going to talk about establishing knowledge of Allah. But when we talk about Huduth Maryama and Delhi and Salha and Khalil and Isra, we want to think about hadith being divided into substances and accidents. Substances, we define them. That's the apple. The accident is its shape and its color. إنما الأعمال بالألوان إنما الأعمال بالأشكال أو إنما الأعمال بالنيات. The Prophet didn't say actions are by your shape, actions are by your height, actions are by your appearance, actions are by your color. Why? All those are accidents. But he said, إنما الأعمال بوان بالنية. And the niyyah شيء حقيقي. It's the intrinsic to my existence. It's actually amazing. And this is the foundation of liberation theology in Islam. That we can talk about maybe one other day. Because the shayateen have turned this into what? Into this. They made accidents substances. So they used that, as we talked about before, when they were attacking George Floyd, rahimahullah. They were attacking him with even wrong assumptions about his accidents. For us, that is a moral crime and a religious violation of the sanctity of human beings. We see that as a human rights violation that goes to the substance of someone. But Muslims were quiet because we're busy. Tawheed, Asma'i wa Sifat, Bid'ah, Thob, where's your beard, this, that. Yeah, that's the important stuff. You can say rahimahullah for a non-Muslim. You can read or watch my recording on this a long time ago. Alhamdulillah. Very clearly stated. Nobody can watch that video, but I'm sure for people who are from the same race as George Floyd, what is unbelievable, man. The trauma that's constantly here. With that in mind, I have to jump into a meeting on these kind of issues right now. This is heavy. Y'all need to go through it, man. And you can look at it. Yes, Mariama. And even stay on if you want to continue to discuss. Yes, Mariama.
I have a quick question. I think I'm getting a bit confused with the word accident in English.
Yani
Like
shay not intrinsic to you, or it's something that comes with you, but you could exist without it.
okay.
Like if I became an albino,
Okay.
like if my color changed, I'm still me.
Mm-hmm.
The apple, no matter what color it is, in substance, we still say it's an apple.
Why not call it coincidence or chance?
He said that before you jumped on. He said, listen, we're going to use terms you might not agree with it, but we use it for precision that will be shown later. Gotcha. I'm just messing with you, man. I'm just messing with you. I'm so exhausted. I had like 3 hours sleep. So I'm just like staying hot. So I don't, if I stop for 1 second now, my substance will turn off. All right. Very interesting discussion. Jazakumullahu khairan. Nice to see you guys. Y'all doing good. You can stay on if you want to, Mariama, and you guys can look at it, discuss it. think about where this can go, and think about how we failed, Sunnis in particular, when we haven't taught them to think through the world with theology. The way theology is taught now, if I stopped after what we learned in the first semester, it's great, right? And if I hadn't said anything about things, it would just be abstractions. Imam Haramain is training you now to see with ihsan. Actually, he's training you to worship Allah as though you see him, even though you can't see him, you know he sees you. And how do you tie that into the world around you? So then you function prophetically, not just theoretically. Wow, let me stop. It's a lot there for you to digest. Y'all doing great. Proud of you. I always tell Mary, man, they're doing good, man. They got so much done. May Allah bless you. I have to jump off into a meeting. I'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah. Make dua for us. Assalamu alaikum.
Delhi, by the way, I do hope as well on our Usul al-Fiqh class that we get to unpack the zakat fatwa.
Yeah, me too. It was very disappointing to read, and I'm actually going through the videos that he Imam Sway put out, and also there have been responses by other people, and I'm just really shocked by it, and I feel very uncomfortable. Like, it's almost like everything you've been taught, even since you were young about this, is like, what does it mean anymore? Because even a Sunday school child understands that zakat is required for the poor, for Muslim poor. So it's like, obviously you learn it's a little bit more complicated when you get older. There are categories, but this is just completely left field. I would have never expected this. I think it's on AMJA, their website, and also as Fiqh Council, they join them in this fatwa. I think essentially it says that Muslims can give zakat to political lobbyists working on behalf of the Muslim community's interests, whether they don't have to be Muslim.
And what is the conflict on this?
Can you repeat the last part? I didn't catch you.
Yeah, sure. What is the conflict on this that we're feeling at odds with?
It's, from my understanding, zakat is for the poor, for Muslim poor. It's, required 2.5% that a Muslim, if they can, give to the poor. But this fatwa is saying that there's a category within zakat, I believe it's for people who are kind of inclined to Islam, that they're not Muslim, but they're inclined, so therefore they can be given zakat. It does exist. They're not Muslim, but I think that the fatwa is taking this category and expanding it and saying that political lobbyists that work on behalf of the Muslim community can receive zakat because they're working on our issues. So they're really like stretching it.
Why do we feel like it's a stretch instead of like taking an issue and applying it to our modern needs? For example, institutions like Code Pink, Jewish Voice for Peace, they're some of the most proactive speakers. And then, one of the reasons I feel like it's a very relevant American Muslim need. And in our history, we have had time, that application where for the safety of Muslims or to incline somebody to come into Islam, as well as allowing the zakat collector to take portion of the funds for their salary. So there are these like caveats in there. And why are we feeling that it is against what is for the best of the ummah versus that's why like APAC and all these lobby groups, they're able to um have such an influence over what do you call it? Over the sorry, so I'll wrap up real quick. My thoughts are like so chopped. That's why they're able to have this influence that they have versus if we are able to influence through funding, then the policies that get put out, we could influence them to be for the greater good of the Muslim community in the US. Why does it feel heartbreaking? So zakat is not just for believers. I mean, in the sense like in the history, we have had situations where a category has been given to disbelievers, as Delhi said, that folks who are will maybe inclined to come into Islam, like it can be used for that. So we have millionaires, and yeah, the thing is, if you can make your zakat fulfillment and get tax breaks, that's like a huge incentive. Otherwise, having to donate and not get the tax incentive, then you're having to like spend money twice to give zakat and then to give donation for tax purposes. Like I feel like it is, I feel listening to this Cliff Note version is actually a good way of combining our religious needs with our current socio-political needs. And I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any problem with Muslims donating to campaigns for specific candidates. I just think that we can use sadaqah for that. Sadaqah is for anything besides for any, and we can give sadaqah to anyone, to non-Muslims, to Muslims. But I think zakat should just be inclined to the poor, primarily to Muslims. And I think that obviously as a scholar, I don't know fully how that category works, but I think it should be two people that are actually individually expressing a clear inclination towards Islam, more than just working for on behalf of the Muslim community, which in the world of politics, what you see isn't always what you're getting. Looks can be deceiving. Some people work for your cause because they're trying to from the back end bring in their own cause, which may completely conflict with our cause. So we're just working in the system because we recognize the reality. We have to work it to some degree, but it's a very, as they say, politics is a very dirty game, and you don't want to get too much caught into it because you might get in the mud, so you have to be very careful. I just think we have many people, we have like single mothers, we have people living like in the inner city that we're not even giving zakat out to these people properly. And I'm just at a loss as to why we feel like he like Imam Swaim said, that we have to feel like have these very complicated processes for them to get funds, but then we can just give quickly, like easily to lobbyists who are very wealthy. I mean, they get paid already. They don't need money in that sense. But I think we have sadaqah, in my opinion.
Salaha.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Dr. Sarah, and I think I agree with Khalil and Delhi in the sense that I think the concern that folks are having, and I think there's validity here, is it's a matter of prioritization for certain campaigns. Like when you work with nonprofits, for example, like even by US law, they're required to kind of disclose what your money is going towards so that people are able to prioritize where their money is going. And when you look at zakat as a percentage, it's a very I mean, isn't it like it's like 2.5%, right? Of your, not even all your wealth, it's 2.5% of the wealth that you're like not actively using, So it's already a very small portion, realistically, of what people are using their wealth for. And I think what we're saying is that the priority of this very small portion of your wealth needs to be addressing the needs of the underserved. Otherwise, we really risk being a team where, like, every team is only as strong as their most vulnerable. Like I was watching the Super Bowl yesterday with friends, and let me tell you, the Patriots, bless him, their young little quarterback who's like 23, he was the weakest link on that team. Kid could not, kid could not. I mean, I was happy for the Seahawks, but kid could not throw a good pass or good ball that entire game. Um, so I think that's what we're saying. The other thing is that donations to political lobbyists are not, it's not a charitable contribution. Like that's not supposed to be tax deductible. Zakat is tax deductible if it's going to like nonprofits, right? Like 501(c)(3)s. So actually, from a tax perspective, like people receive more tax benefit when they're giving charitable contributions versus political donations. I mean, we do absolutely need to give political donations, but I think this is taking the approach of using a mechanism we already have in place for a different purpose to organize political donations. And I actually think that there's a risk of that doing us a disservice because I think we need to organize a process specifically for like political campaigning and like lobbying, not use zakat for that mechanism because it's kind of, I think it might hurt our community in the long run because it'll confuse two separate needs. And I think I worry that it might mean that we don't do either effectively.
Yeah. If I can just quickly like just add on, because I agree with what Salha and Khalil and Deli was mentioning. I've been reading a lot of what the scholars have mentioned. I watched part one and half of part two of what Sheikh Sohaib has put out in terms of this fatwa. And the entire first video, he focuses on, I think there's two parts, right? The first part is like looking at it from like on a legal, like legally, Islamically, was this fatwa done correctly? And then secondly, just looking into the social implications, right? And so like one of the first things he mentioned was how they used a hadith because and I read the fatwa as well. If you look at the fatwa, one of the things that they mention is that because this is different than just saying giving your zakat to political lobbyists. Sorry, sadaqah to political lobbyists. This is saying zakat. Zakat has a legal implication that has a nas attached to it. Like we learn nas, right? Like where Ramadan, like there it's specific, right? No one says, oh, the month of fasting is uh for 30 days straight is the Dhul Qa'dah or Rajab, right? No, we know it's like Ramadan, right? 60 masakin, we know it's right. We learned that in class, nas. And zakat, Allah lists out in Surah At-Tawbah exactly who zakat goes to. So one of the things I was watching Sheikh Saib's video where he was breaking down with how do you even like evaluate things is that firstly, and I know we haven't learned this yet, but he was talking about qata'i, which is like tied to nas. It's like it's the evidence that is tied to like explicit and clear meaning, which we learned was nas, right? Explicit text that there is no different meanings. And we learned that Zahir has many meanings, right? Now, in the fatwa, they were mentioning that, oh, like we're using this category to apply to qulub al-mu'allaf, like the people like which is part of like in the ayah, those to who hearts are drawn to Islam. But um and I really recommend you guys watch the videos because Sheikh Suhaib was breaking it down, which is like you can't use basically like a secondary source, something that's like Vanni or Zahir to support what's or to in front of what's Nas. Like Nas has to be the first top, and then everything else has to support that Nas. You know what I mean? Like Hadith couldn't go against what's Nas, like because Nas is the highest form. It's what Allah has said, right? Um, so I think that first thing, sorry, I'm not like, I'll read the message. So I think the first thing in terms of looking at this fatwa is one, was this responsibly um, demonstrate or calculated and responsibly executed in a legal perspective, which those who have expertise in fiqh have said this was not responsibly done, right? And all their readings, like Imam Tom wrote something about it, like Sheikh Sohaib wrote a whole video, did a whole video breaking out the terminology. He even used our HTMLs. So I think he might teach us this. But anyways, the second part is that what everyone has been saying here, which is like unfortunately, especially now since everything is zakat eligible in our communities, people are unfortunately, we as a community, Muslims, we haven't gotten our priorities straight in the sense that people are taking their zakat to fund constructions of certain things over taking care of what was zakat was supposed to do in the first place, which is redistributing wealth from the wealthy to the poor. Like imagine if everyone properly did their zakat, including those countries who have all these oils that they need to pay zakat on. Allah knows if they're actually paying zakat on, there would not be extreme poverty in this world, right? So I think that's the first step, which is, and Imam Tom says this very well, and he's an expert in terms of the political landscape. Like he studied this, right? And he studied fiqh. So he knows both well. Um, and he says, like, had we been doing what zakat was supposed to do, he probably would have aligned with this fatwa. But because it's not like we're still like, for example, zakat al-fitr, the masajids are not on time with giving the zakat al-fitr to those who are eligible to receive it, right? So had we been on our priority straight, I think then maybe this could have worked. But again, uh, the wording would have to be different because the way that like Sheikh Sohaib was breaking it down was that them using it as zakat specifically was wrong. Um, but yeah, that's so I think there's just two, long story short, I think there's two sides to this. One is, was it legally correct to say zakat, right? And then two is the social implications. Because I do agree with you, Sarah, that in that we need to build like political strength and political power, but is saying it under the name of zakat the right way? Because we don't know who gets to benefit from this, who does it harm, if which communities in the Muslim community it'll harm, and which allies it'll harm actually. How do we know if this fatwa will actually harm Jewish Voices for Peace, right? Like it did not clearly state who will it harm in the process. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, I
um
agree. I mean, listening to everyone's opinion, I'm not gonna give too much of my opinion here without like going and actually reviewing what it says and what Sheikh Suhaib is saying. But just the thoughts that are coming to my mind is once again, I do see benefit in it, but I do hear the concerns as well. Like the thing about like there's already sadaqah. The thought that was coming to my mind is that because zakat is mandatory, there is more being collected. So the pool for zakat is usually bigger than sadaqah. And even if it is just 2.5%, 2.5% of someone's large income is a lot more. And try to get money out of people for any sort of donation. It's like pulling tooth and nail versus like, the benefit of just being able to pull from zakat is like it's a mandatory thing. It's like paying taxes. Nobody's going to argue with you about it. If they meet the criteria of donating or giving zakat, they're going to give it. And then the next thing is, you don't have to contribute to this because we don't have like a centralized system for collecting zakat like we have the IRS. So if you don't agree with it, you don't have to give money in it versus if you're somebody who believes in the benefit it will have in our time right now and you donate and you're like I have fulfilled my zakat obligation and now anything beyond it is sadaqah, then Allah is the one who's keeping accounting and charting of it. Next thing that comes to mind is I do see what you're saying, how it can be misused. And if those like situations were not put in the fatwa, like for clauses, like these are the situations that will disqualify you from being able to receive the zakat. Kind of like I saw somebody mention that they're like, people who are taking money for Sharia-free caucus, they're not our friends. Yeah, we don't want our money to go to those type of people. So it would be good to have those qualifiers who qualifies for zakat. And maybe it would benefit from having a time limit that needs to be reviewed regularly to see if we still meet the criteria for this. Kind of like when they give us, the Medicare payment, they review this like the Medicare cut. So retarded. Um, they will review it like every few years to see if they're going to implement the cut or not. So maybe this could be one of those clauses that they need to come and keep looking at. Because we do have a need for even Muslim politicians to go up and lobby and run. And they don't get just via regular donation. So maybe this um, fatwa would help those types of people, like Muslims who have our mentality, who agree with us, and they need support running and being able to take this money and put it behind them to help them gain the traction and momentum they need to run tete-a-tete with all these other, Zio, pedophiliac, satanistic cults people. Okay.
Do you
I
think
am
that we
done.
could benefit from zakat in this giving zakat to the poor? Do you think that the Muslim community as a whole can benefit from helping the poor?
That is definitely one of the things, but also remember, like these politicians are the ones that are making the systems and the rules. And if we have the right people in those positions of power, because of, whether it be zakat, sadaqah, or just, political contribution, these are the people that are going to come back and write laws that are going to uplift the bottom of the well. Because if they're being funded by us, our voices don't matter. Our dollars is what is the real power and vote of influence here. Um, and if they want to keep getting our funding, then they will have to comply with our demands. And so then we can actually influence policy changes as well. It's not just putting money in the hands of the poor, it's also creating the system where they can take that money and climb up to have that support for education, for childcare, um, my gosh, like I can go on and on about the taxes that W-2 income earners have to pay. Um, but like having the right person in power will uplift the poverty as well. So maybe it's not going directly into the hands of the poor like we're used to thinking traditional sense, but in the time that we're in, I think a lot of poverty is caused because we have the wrong people in positions of power. And politics is part of Sharia. It's not something that we can just like be like, oh, it's haram, like just stay the heck away from it.
I would say it's more of a system than individuals. I mean, we have, if you look at it from a like maybe socialist point of view, they believe that in like imperialism, that the ruling class are working for their interests, and it's a system that is designed to benefit the ruling class. So giving money to them essentially is about their
So Delhi,
personal.
if you were running for election, if you were running for a local city position or Congress or something, you know, wouldn't you need support, funding support?
I would need support, but I also know that there's money that's waiting for me many different places, not just from Muslim lobbyists. And you're
Do you
gonna
know how difficult it is to get that going? I mean, you probably know it more than me because you're in the middle of it. When you have an organization and everybody can like focus on it and they know that their money is going to be protected, it is a lot easier as a donor to give. It reduces a barrier as a donor. So if you had an institution where, I was able to donate and I knew that it would fulfill my zakat and get me a tax deduction, I would be more inclined to give that donation locally. Otherwise, I would just send my zakat abroad, which is majority of the people that are coming from abroad do.
I think that's also, yeah, issue that we need to I think we've never really created a culture where zakat is local. We
And
have
that's because we're a global community. And this is where we need to start thinking about our place in America and our identity and our growth and culture in America. Our ancestors, our first folks. I mean, I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born here, but my identity is American. And I think it is a powerful move. And we are making Islam part of the American fabric. Like I just listening to this fatwa, like it's making me feel like we're finally addressing American problems with Islam. Salha, you just gotta speak up and stop keeping your hands up, otherwise we'll just...
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that I don't think you can get a tax deduction for lobbying. Like even if like first of all like lobbying organizations, I don't think they can fall under 501(c)s.
So I think what this is probably gonna do is they're probably gonna have a 501(c)(3), or there is a way to do there's a 501 grant that is allowed for lobbying. Um, and if you're giving directly, I think it may not be counting as tax deduction, but the organization itself may be able to collect and then have other branches that they can filter things out through and then put it in. I think there's a political action committee that can be tax deductible. But when we were applying for our 501(c)(3), there was like one of those like what category of nonprofit are you signing?
Okay. I'll have to look into it. I mean, it's been a while since I looked at tax accounting, so that's probably something I should look into anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
no worries.
I looked
But
up
I
at
remember there was like a category, like when we were applying, there was like a section of it. So obviously I have not done a political action nonprofit application, but I think there is something.
oh, 501(c)(4, Delhi is saying. I'll
So
have to
is
look
that
at it.
So
tax
Yeah.
deductible, Del?
no, it's not, but it allows you to donate with and endorse candidates. Otherwise, in
Yeah.
501(c)(3), you cannot.
Yeah. 501(c)(3), they're very strict about because it's only like educational institutions, like it's very, but I think I think it's very interesting what you guys are pointing out. I mean, from what I've seen, I think it's really both. Like we talked earlier about, is it of benefit to the community to like provide for the impoverished, right? And certainly there's like, I mean, we know obviously that there's blessings with the law, right? Like we're not talking about that. We're talking about like material benefit in this world, right? But I'll be honest with you, as someone who works in the financial sector, what people often overlook is the resiliency and the financial return on investing in the impoverished. Because because even if you have a single individual who is incredibly wealthy, like think like a Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos, right? Um, a principle of finance is diversification. You are at risk when your wealth is consolidated like that in individuals because it is very easy for an individual to lose their wealth and then you're stuck, right? Like for example, Sheikh Sahib has talked about this, right? Like he's like, we have a multimillionaire brother here who like owns businesses where he was like, we could go to him for money and he's a good individual, he would give it, right? But the thing is, he could be attacked by ICE. He could be like inappropriately, like jailed. He could have his assets seized. Like it's actually much more resilient from a financial perspective to have wealth in the hands of many families, many people, because that gives you access to like a lot more power that is difficult to it's a lot more difficult to attack. The other thing that I think people forget is that the financial return on investing in the impoverished is huge because people actually only need like a little bit of help usually to build strength. Like for example, when the housing crisis happened, or like I think a few years ago, right? There was a few people in my mom's community, my parents' community, who needed help with rent for like 3 months, right? And so people got together and paid for their rent for 3 months, right? And by the next year, those people had gotten other jobs, they had bought homes, they had given like probably like 4 or 5 times the amount that was donated to them in like sadaqah to the mosque. They had, you know what I mean? Like the return on like investing in the impoverished, and it's not even just a single generation return, it's usually a generational return. Like you help a family not lose their housing in one season, right? And alhamdulillah, what comes out of that is that they, stay in their homes, they build wealth, and also their 3 kids who end up going to school and working and getting higher payer jobs than their parents also come out and become like contributing members of the society. So
Mm.
absolutely, political lobbying is important. And to be honest, we haven't done a great job of that as a Muslim community. I don't know if it's because of the finances or if it's because honestly we're so busy arguing with each other about not important things that we haven't funneled our money towards like things we need to.
And another thing is that a lot of our parents, or if they were not born here, they still have a lot of devotion to their background. Like they
Giving
don't
money back
see,
home.
yeah, like there's a lot of that baggage and that gets passed down to us. And that's why I think, um, once again, like the fatwa that we're talking about, like this, it is making it relevant to us. We are now the ones having this discussion, like, is this legitimate or not? Right? And so talking about the diversification, you don't have to give all your zakat in one place. You can also diversify your zakat contribution. You can give a percentage of it to this if you choose that this is something that applies to you, relevant to your mission and your what you're trying to achieve. And 100% I agree with you with you, Salha, about investing in the bottom line. That is why Allah, I believe, I think is one of the wisdoms of zakat is that you have those who have and those who pass it down to others. So it's like you're not only raising the ceiling, or actually you raise the ceiling higher when you're actually raising the floor with it. So establishing generational wealth and financial freedom, that is the key to being able to do power. But most of our families don't even think like that because they're
That,
still stuck in that like survival and mechanism and scarcity mindset. Um, but once again, like investing in the right political candidates will is part of the solution for raising the impoverished. Everybody who is doing cuts on teachers, school funds, healthcare funds, housing, etc. These are all politicians. They're not taking cuts on their paycheck. And in order for us to have our voices heard, we need people who is able to look at our problems, as Muslims and as Americans, not just somebody who has ties back home and is like their body is here, but their heart is still in their motherland. They're looking at America as our homeland at this point. And I think this is one of the conversations that's saying like, we need to talk about this. But I agree, there is wherever there's money, wherever there's power, there's going to be shaitan coming in to, you know, influence us into abusing it. So the fatwa definitely needs those like restrictive clauses as well and a deadline. And I think that could be something that would make this a more powerful thing. And in
can
regards to whether you give zakat here or not, that is an individual decision. But
can I say
having that platform is, I think it's powerful.
mm, can I say one thing? I do agree with you, Sarah, on the importance of being able to just build that general that just being able to build wealth and power in that as communities. I do think, especially Sarah and Salha, you guys should really check out Awqaf, Waqf, not in the Western lens, but in the Islamic lens, because we figured out as an ummah how to and Khalid gave a really great example. Thank you, Khalil. Where at one point, during the Ottoman period, no one had to give zakat, and when we're talking about like decolonization of the Muslim world, or colonization of the Muslim world, one of the first things that was destroyed on an economic level was the waqfs. Where do you think endowments came from? It didn't come from the West. It came from, they took that idea from Muslims. And it was that there wasn't property owned by one single individual. And I really appreciate, subhanAllah, Salih, I never thought about that, when an individual, anything can happen to that individual, right? But these, there were certain institutions, masajids, hospitals that wasn't belonged to one individual, but belonged to the jama'ah, the community. It belonged to the public. And that was very excellent. So that's just one thing. I really think we should all look into waqfs, and I hope uh, um, we can find like great resources, but specifically Sarah and Salihah, because I know you guys are really interested in the finance aspect and you guys are studying Islam. This might be a really great way to like dig deep into that. Second thing that I wanted to say is that um, I really think that we should all read the fatwa and then read what the scholars who are trained well in the subject have said upon it, because one of the things, like, we're not trained, none of us here is trained, right? And yes, we have certain knowledge of like how does this work or that work, like 501(c)s, etc., right? But we're not trained in how to evaluate this fatwa. I don't think we have the ability to be able to, like, I think us as students right now, our position is to read what those who have been trained are talking about. And so I really encourage us all. I would love to have like a part two of this conversation. Once we've read the fatwa to understand what they have said, to watch Sheikh Sohaib's three part videos, because he breaks it down a lesson actually. Like I'm telling you, like there was terms I was like, oh, we haven't learned what qat'i is yet. We haven't learned what dhanni is yet. And he breaks it down like, okay, like the evidence that they used for this, was it valid? The second part is yeah, and I think once we're able to 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 read and learn, then we're able to then see like, okay, was this or not? Because I don't think the critiques, and this is what I appreciate. Remember earlier in our usul al-fiqh class, Sheikh Suhaib said that, you'll see, and how um, Imam al-Haramain um, outlines outlined is that in usul al-fiqh, you'll see those that are responsible with knowledge is that they critique with adab. And like that's what I've been noticing, the different shuyukh who have been trained in fiqh have been critiquing this with adab. I don't think, and going back to what you said, Sarah, I don't think anyone has said like this fatwa is complete garbage. I think the issue was like it's creating, it's what was the word? I think the word that was said was the there we go. It creates structural instability. This fatwa is creating structural instability based on where we are as a community in Muslim America, in Islam America, like in terms of being Muslims in America. So I want to encourage us that I do think that we should all like just learn, and I know we're gonna learn in our Usul al-Fiqh class as well, but just to read everything, because maybe we're not like you know what I mean, like we're saying like, okay, but what are the, maybe they could have outlined or restricted, maybe that's a valid critique, like they could have laid out restrictions, but I don't think we'll be able to get the full picture as to why the critiques are the critiques the way they are, and how was the fatwa set up, unless we learned how do you properly evaluate a fatwa, which we haven't learned. We learned nas, we learned dhanni, but we haven't learned the full picture yet, if that makes sense. Like my point is, I think we should all just read and watch everything that's out there from those who are trained, so we can learn how did they evaluate it, and now we bring our own thoughts and our own um our own rationale thinking to it. Yeah.
Do we want to watch and read together or like as a class?
I'm so sorry. I'm probably a bit of a slow reader, so I probably need to read on my own. But I can do it tonight, inshallah. And like if you guys want to chat, I have an appointment tomorrow, but maybe when.
I will need more time. I'm slower than you, Solha. That's why I was asking if we wanted to read together, because then if somebody else is reading it out loud, kind of like an audiobook and giving commentary, like my brain work would be delegated, outsourced.
And someone when I'm reading, I need to like I need time to just like I'll pause and then just like okay. Like yes, I'm down to give us a timeline. I'm timeline since from what everyone's saying, Saul, how you said you have an appointment tomorrow. What do you guys think is a good timeline to kind of go through all the content and
I
then
need a week.
a week? Yeah. Because then by then we'll have our Usul al-Fiqh class. So maybe we might even have more things added to our
Can I just
reading.
also thank you guys for, I know I mentioned this when we first started the Usul al-Fiqh class, but learning to discuss not with emotion necessarily. I'm not saying emotion is bad. Absolutely, we should. I'm a big fan of emotions now that I know more about them. But I do think that for me, learning to discuss and reason like with evidence and not just with my like gut feeling or like reliance on my particular background and lived experience is like new for me. And I appreciate you guys like being there with me in that process and putting up with, you know what I mean? Because like I'm learning how to do it and I'm not very good at it yet. Um, so I've never had that opportunity before, and I appreciate you guys like making the space for me to do that.
Thank you so much for saying that, Sadha. And likewise, like I'm very grateful for this space. And that's why I said earlier what I said, because to remind us that, also like to remind us like before we get into I think this, I think that, for us to go back to how we're being trained right now, which is like different from how we're raised, which is like before I thoughts to get down to what's truth, what's haqq, right? Like what is truth, right? Even in critiquing something that may have different opinions, that can be done in a way that's like, was this, like, you know what I mean? Like the steps to seeking truth done properly. Um, so yeah, I think like we're definitely we're learning. We're learning, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allah, what can and allow us to turn that into action. Because, but by the way, like subhanallah, if you guys notice, a lot of these commentary on the critique specifically on the fatwa by the scholars trained in fiqh, none of them have posted any of this on social media. If you guys, I noticed this. I deleted my social media and then I re-downloaded it specifically to check if it was posted on social media. And it wasn't. It was only posted on Substack and then like YouTube and things like that. And I found that very interesting because they understood again, this is like making me really respect the maturity of scholarship, because they know this is not something that any one of the masses can just understand. Like you post these critiques, then people are like qala sheikh, qala this, qala that, right? People start arguing and they have not even learned this at all. So if you guys notice, like even the platforms that the scholars have released it wasn't a very, because on Substack, it's like, I don't know if you guys know the platform, but it's like people write and like you read people, it's like a blog, a professional blog. Um, exactly. It's gonna exactly a lot of strife, yeah. So even in like there's so much maturity, right? There's so much maturity because this fatwa also has scholars' names listed who signed it. And that's why one of the like, for example, like if you see some of the critique, they're like, with all due to respect, with the great works that Sheikh blah 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 and Sheikh blah 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 has done, then they went into the critique, right? Like, because it's not bashing someone, but it's just saying like, hey, let's get to the nitty gritty of like, how was this properly assessed as those trained in this? Are we properly following the steps of how to correctly and responsibly um, conclude a fatwa that would impact lives. Like it's not just impacting, it's impacting people's lives, right? So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
On a different subject, I had a question. Did you guys properly understand today's theology lesson?
Yeah, I was following what he was saying for the most part about knowledge, the different types of knowledge. Um, you know, or were you specifically referring to the part about those substances and accidents?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm trying to like how do you take substance and the accident part into like broader issues?
Maybe like
Um,
substance, like we're all human beings, but the accents is that we are of different colors and different nations and tribes. Just like in America, we have different people of different races and ethnicities. And when he said, like, for example, shaitan, the shayateen make accents into substances, they make it that matters more. That is what defines your humanity in a way. Like the accidents becomes the humanity,
mm,
even though we're all human, and these are just it's just it's we're just in different states. Accents are the state of substances. Um,
okay.
that's how I understand it in that way.
I think what I struggle with is that I keep on coming to this stuff with like my understanding of what that word already means. And sometimes that has nothing to do with how it's been defined in the class, you know? Um, yeah, I think what you said is helpful, Deli. And then I kind of have to come up with a different memory tool to help me remember like how they've defined that term and that concept.
I,
Um,
I wrote down he gave the example of an apple. The
Mhm.
substance is like the shape, and the accident is its color.
Yeah, I think shape is part of its quality, right?
Mm, that's what I wrote down. When he was trying to give an example, I don't know. Is qualities another? I just
Sorry.
think the reality is made of substances and accidents.
Hmm. Yeah, sorry. I meant sh I meant I think shape is part of accidents because it's the redness and the roundness. Roundness is part of shape or accidents, but the apple itself is a substance.
Okay, maybe that's the case.
So I guess it's like maybe like the skeleton is a substance of like humans, but then our height, like if you're tall, if you're short, your skin color, your race, your ethnicity, that's a quality, not a substance. I'm trying to think like if we're applying it today with how like ICE, for example, like what Trump mentioned about Somalis in Minnesota, the Somali community. How similar to what you said, Delia, about, Black people in this country, being here for for decades, right? Not decades, just centuries, right? Or
Centuries, yeah.
centuries, yeah. And building what is today. Similar, very similar to the Somali community that they have been some of the first wave of immigrants that have came and really like worked hard in this country. And so when we see Trump define them as criminals or as this or that, he's not getting he's not getting to the substance of who they are. He's giving them a quality, and is that quality actually rooted in truth? Would that be a correct? I don't know if you guys, I don't know if that would be like a correct train of thought.
Sorry, could you repeat that last part, Mariama? The one where you're saying I don't know if that's a correct train of thought in terms of
Mhm.
like I think defining equality.
Hmm. Like when Trump is calling Somalis in Minnesota that they're criminals or they're lazy, um, he's not defining them by their substance. He's defining them by a quality. And is that quality even rooted in truth? Like that's the question. Like he's using a quality for them. Now the investigation is that quality rooted in truth or batil and just complete nonsense? Like I don't know if that's a correct train of thought in terms of what we're learning about substance and accidents.
I think so. I think Sheikh has given that example before. And I
Mhm.
know it kind of ties to, I remember one time when I was talking to a therapist, she talked about one of the mental traps in her field is like generalization. And basically what she said about generalization is essentially when you take, I guess to put it in our terminology, it's when you take an accident that describes a substance uh within certain parameters or within very specific circumstances, and then generalize it to every type of substance that might be tangentially related, not related, might be, you know what I mean? And she talked about how that was like a logical fallacy because you don't actually know that accident or that kind of quality applies to those substances, you know? So like, I mean, she was doing it in the context of like, like relationships or failure and being like, oh, I failed in this job, therefore I will fail in all jobs, or like I failed in this one particular instance and so I'm a failure. Like I now am a failure in all jobs, or like everyone like me will also be a failure in this job, right? Both of which are like fallacies in attaching like a quality to a substance.
Mm. Mm.
I'm reading here that accidents are qualities that cannot exist alone. They must quote unquote ride on a substance. So accident, I think, and qualities, I think, are synonymous. So we apply quality or accident to a substance.
I feel like that also adds like another element, Deli, like the idea that a true accident that can be attributed to a substance can't be like it couldn't exist on its own. I wonder about that. Like, for example, let's say we're saying that we define someone as a criminal, right? But I'm thinking, sorry, I'm like I'm getting myself in twisted knots here.
No, no, no. I think you're getting at something, Sadha. I think you're getting at something because, and I think it relates back to what we just learned about hadith. What's temp?
Exactly, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying, where
that
I'm
it
like, does it
originated.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, does it even make sense to define someone as having the quality of being a criminal when it's like a temporary state that can exist apart from them? Like it's not like I have curly hair. You can't just have curly hair independent of me, right? Unless it's attached to someone else, right? But like the state of being a criminal is like a temporary state that's actually more associated with a transaction or an action, right? Like you can describe an action as being criminal. I don't know that it really makes sense to define a person as being criminal because it like they're not a criminal all the time in everything, right? Even if someone had committed a crime, they may not be a criminal in another context. Like maybe they've gotten a traffic ticket and that was a crime and they were criminal in doing a traffic violation, but they're not a crime criminal when it comes to theft, right? Like so maybe from a logical perspective, like a logical argument perspective, it doesn't even make sense to define the substance of a person as being a criminal when being a criminal is attached to like transactions.
Yeah. Or that a factor could have caused it to occur because originated knowledge, it starts at a point in time. So like you said, Sadha, like they could not be a criminal like with, for example, getting a ticket, right? Versus like or in the ticket and versus not theft. Or they weren't a criminal once in their life, and then a factor that created that quality, right? Like poverty. Sometimes poverty drives people to steal, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I,
Yeah, like you're saying about the example for curly hair, it's curly because of the hair. The hair, it's just the quality of the hair. Otherwise, there's no such thing as curly without something that's attached to be
mm,
called curly. So I do understand what you're saying. Also, like even color, you have the color spectrum. I remember when I was a kid, we learned like, when you turn the lights off, there's no color. Color only exists with lights, the absence of
mm,
light or combining of lights. There's no color without light. So
oh,
I kind of made me think about
oh,
that when I was listening to y'all talk.
oh. That's a really good example, Delhi. Wow, mashallah. Wow.
That's why as far as this immigrant thing, I don't believe in borders. We should have open border because we're just all people. It's the borders that cause so many problems, in my opinion.
I always agreed with that because I had like so my dad was someone who was like displaced by war. And so he, like his family immigrated to Bangladesh when he was little, and then they went into hiding for 2 years, and then they like fled Bangladesh to the US. And so my dad has always had like a very confusing cultural identity. Like every time I've asked him or it's come up in conversation, like what he is. So my dad is ethnically Indian, Sarah, but like he's always kind of resented India because, like, as Muslim Indians, his family faced like a lot of discrimination there, which is like why they moved to Bangladesh. But then he was only there for a few years and then he was in hiding. And he felt like this isn't totally accurate because, again, people's perceptions are not accurate, right? But he felt like he had to leave as a kid because he wasn't Bangladeshi. So then he didn't associate himself as being Indian. He didn't associate himself as being Bangladeshi, but he was also an immigrant at 17 here in the US. And so he didn't, you know what I mean? So when I was a kid, it was super confusing because based on who asked me and what the context is, he would just change his answer. Like, at different times, my dad has told me he was Indian. Then sometimes my family would be like, oh no, he was Pakistani because I guess Bangladesh was Pakistan when he was there for a period of time. Then sometimes when he found out, for example, all the shady stuff that Pakistan did in Bangladesh recently, he was like, oh no, I had a Bangladeshi passport, which is true, but like it's not what you know what I mean? So he was like, oh, you can tell people I was Bangladesh, you know what I mean? He's had like such a confusing identity my whole life. Um, and I remember as a kid being like, you know what? Actually, people's nationality does change all the time. Like, I happen to have been born here, so I identify as and grow up here, so I identify as American. But like, I could move to another country with, inshallah, my like future husband, and then my kids will suddenly be another nationality, you know what I mean? Which is a totally different nationality from their grandparents, from their other relatives. Like, it's I think it's funny because I think it's a matter of us attaching qualities to the wrong thing, right? Like we've been attaching nationality to the people, but actually nationality is just a function of where you happen to be at a point in time.
I mean, Salha, great, literally a great evidence of exactly what you're saying is like, look at the Amazigh or the Berber. They're like in 5 different countries. You find Amazigh, Berber, which they have said they use both terminology themselves, in Morocco, in the Western Sahara country, which, if you just think about it, it was part of literally where Morocco and Mauritania is, but because of nation states, now it's 2 different people. Like, it's ridiculous. Algeria, you'll find like it's subhanAllah. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
All right, Alhamdulillah. I think we've reached a nice natural wrap up. I'm gonna hop off. It was a very pleasant conversation. Going back to something that Salha had said, that I really appreciate the space to be able to have safe conversation about these topics that are very important, can be easily controversial without getting riled up. I appreciate how everybody's uh, able to keep their cool and handle this in a level-headed manner instead of just reacting, which is what the rest of the world is doing. Instead of like actually following a process, they just do it for the adrenaline rush of it. And I appreciate being able to discuss this in a controlled manner. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. See you tomorrow, inshallah. Who's getting misty? Khalil, who's getting misty? No, I need to clear my throat. I don't cry that easily. No, that was a cough that I was like choking. All right, guys. See you tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Assalamu alaikum.